You're listening to the Bears Barroom Radio Network, and the following program is suitable for all audiences.
Paxton for three! Yeah! Yeah!
In 1993, when Chicago Bulls guard John Paxson sunk the series-winning shot in Game 6 of the NBA Finals, Mark Schanowski was there reporting. In 1988, when Michael Jordan beat Dominique Wilkins in what is considered the greatest, most controversial slam dunk duel of all time, David Schuster was there reporting.
What kind of expectations do you set for yourself individually going into your career?
In 2010, when Derrick Rose said,
"Why can't I be the MVP of the league? Why can't I be the best player in the league? I don't see why. Why can't I do that?"
It was Mark Schanowski who asked the question.
It is my distinct honor to present the 2010-2011 NBA Most Valuable Player Award to Derrick Rose of the Chicago Bulls.
In 2011, when Rose accepted the Most Valuable Player Award to become the youngest MVP in the history of the league, David Schuster was there reporting. Schanowski, Schuster, two of Chicago's most accomplished NBA reporters. This is Sharpshooters.
And welcome into the latest edition of the Sharpshooters. I'm David Schuster. He is Mr. Mark Schanowski. And Mark, coming up, we are going to have on today's podcast the ever-opinionated Mr. Vince Goodwill. And you can follow him from Yahoo Sports on Twitter at Vince Goodwill. And I know he'll have some good stuff for us.
Well, you know, it's interesting watching his development as a media personality. Who first came in, you know, he was from the print background, and he had strong opinions the first time I met him. But the way he developed as an on-air personality was really interesting to watch. And Yahoo has also used him not only as a writer, but also in a lot of their video forums. So he's doing great work there, obviously covering the finals. He's back in Michigan now. He was living in New York for a while, but now he moved back to his hometown. And it'll be fun catching up with him. He was always very close with Jimmy Butler, so I know he's going to have some feelings about what Jimmy did yesterday, because that performance was off the charts. When you consider that Jimmy Butler joins Jerry West and LeBron James as the only players ever to have a 40-point triple-double in the finals, that's pretty impressive stuff.
Yeah, Jimmy was obviously very good. I was at the Bears game, so I wasn't able to watch the game as it was live. I didn't get home until about 9
I was going to rip you
night.
for that. Then I looked at my watch. I'm like, oh, wait a minute. The game didn't end until 6:30, and
Right.
you had to do some posts and whatever. And so, yeah, you're off the hook on that, but at least you caught up on it.
Yeah, and actually, coming home and watching the Jimmy Butler and the NBA highlights, it woke me up because I fell asleep at the Bears game yesterday.
Yeah, that was one of the worst things I've ever seen.
Awful. It was even worse in person. But anyway, let's talk about the game last night. And I'm glad the Heat won, because I had the Lakers winning this series in 5 games. So I think that's the one game.
The gentleman's sweep.
Yes, I thought that was the one game that they would win last night. I mean, 100% kudos to Jimmy Butler. He scored the 40 points, didn't even take a 3-point shot. He played his game to a T yesterday, and really what I thought was most impressive, we're going to hear from Jimmy in just a second here, his numbers: 40 points, 11 rebounds, 13 assists, a monster triple-double.
And he was efficient, too. He was 14 of 20 from the field, 12 of 14 from the free throw line, did not attempt a single three-pointer in this day and age of you have to shoot the three to be a good player. He scores 40 points and literally willed his team to victory, because some of the young guys are playing a little bit tight. Tyler Hero played well in the fourth quarter, but really struggled through the first 3 quarters. Duncan Robinson, he was just out of his mind. He was taking off-balance 3-point shots trying to get it going, and he just couldn't find the range.
And even, the secret weapon, Myers Leonard, was perfect from the field, hitting all 3 of his field. I told you, he's the pride of Champaign.
Myers Leonard, I tell you what, you look at who does not belong on this court, and he's the one that stands out.
Yeah, he's got an NBA big body. Doesn't really move all that well, but whatever.
And he's getting an NBA paycheck, too.
Yes, most importantly, him and his accountant. Anyway, I thought Jimmy last night, it so reminded me of the final game of Magic Johnson's rookie season, when the Lakers were playing without Kareem Abdul-Jabbar, and Magic had to take over the game in every aspect possible. He played center that game, my lord. So I thought Jimmy did everything possible, including, and this is not easy to do, he frustrated LeBron. You do not see that very often. LeBron sulked off the court at the end of the game yesterday. You could tell he was pissed, and I think that's a bad omen, because as they do say a lot, you don't tug on Superman's cape, and I got a feeling LeBron is going to come back with a vengeance in the next game.
You're probably right. He's going to try to go out early, be very aggressive on the offensive end, and when he steamrolls to the basket, he gets to the free throw line almost automatically. But, if there's one area of maybe some slippage in the Kings game, I think it's on the defensive end. I don't think he's as good of a one-on-one defender as he used to be. I know that they used him against Jamal Murray in the last series late in games to try to shut him down, and we remember years and years ago where he guarded Derrick Rose in the Eastern Conference Finals. But LeBron at 35, I don't think he's an elite one-on-one defender anymore, and Jimmy was able to get by him a couple of times and keep possessions in the fourth quarter. So I don't know necessarily that he's going to be able to take on that matchup defensively, because after the game, he said nothing but great things about Jimmy. He said Jimmy's one of the best competitors in our league, and he said, when I'm done playing, these are the kind of matchups I'll miss. The chance to go one-on-one against an elite player. And we didn't really think of Jimmy as an elite scorer during his time in Chicago, but he had a lot of big games. We were talking about a game in Toronto where he carried the team, scored like 20 points in a row in the fourth quarter, and they won in overtime, and he's had 50-point games in the past. So Jimmy can do this. It's just I think he's more comfortable, especially with this Miami team, being more of a facilitator.
Well, I thought one of the other big things in last night's game, and now the series is 2-1 in favor of the Lakers, with a very, very important game coming up, obviously. Anthony Davis only had 9 shots, and he was in foul trouble, and as you mentioned to me, because you watched the game live, I didn't see it live, I had to go back and look at the taped highlights, that he was in foul trouble early on, and he just didn't appear to want to pick up that next foul that would put him on the bench. So actually, Anthony Davis, who's been the best player overall in this series, and maybe the entire postseason, was passive, and I thought that actually hurt the Lakers.
Yeah, and with Bam Adebayo's sideline, he might be back for Game 4, but he missed Games 2 and 3. That's a matchup you go to over and over and over again, because Miami has no one on their roster that can even think about guarding Anthony Davis. That's something that LeBron, as the leader, or Rajon Rondo when he's in there, should just be demanding that Anthony Davis gets in the post, takes the ball, and either squares up a guy, shoots that little jump shot, or goes strong to the rim, because no one on the Miami Heat can stop Anthony Davis.
All right, let's hear from Jimmy. This is post-game now. And again, his numbers, 40 points, 11 rebounds, 13 assists, a monster triple-double. And right after the game, he didn't care at all about having that triple-double.
We won. I could care less about, a triple-double. We played this game to win. I'm glad my teammates got a lot of trust and faith in me to go out there and hoop like that. But like I always say, if you guarantee me a win, I could care less.
All right, one more from Jimmy, and then I want to get your opinion on this. He said after the game also, numbers just don't mean anything to him.
Everybody remembers winning. That's it. I don't care how many points you score. All I care if you win or loss. And for us, we're all about winning. We are. I say it all the time, and I mean it. The guys that we have, the group that Coach Pat and Coach Mo put together, it's always to win, nothing else. So I hope the next game I score 0 and y'all talk all y'all want to talk and we win, so I can come up here and say the same thing.
All right, Mark, I'm going to ask your opinion. I'm 50-50 on what he just said. Obviously, winning is the most important part because that's what people will always remember, and he's all about winning. But come on, what player
if Jimmy
in the
Butler
NBA
scores 0 on Tuesday night, they're going to lose by about 30.
Well, that for sure.
So that's a problem right there.
Where I'm going with this, and we've been around athletes our whole lives. I mean,
We've been around Jimmy a lot, too.
Yeah, that too.
The BS meter can be pretty high with Jimmy. There were times in post-game press conferences, I'm sitting there, I'm literally shaking my head as he's talking because I don't know what he's talking. Because
did his nose grow?
Jimmy's one of those guys that he'll try to give you that politically correct quote, but he'll spin it in a way that it doesn't make any sense. Jordan would do that at times too, where he'd try to use the big words, he'd use them inappropriately, it would kind of change the meaning of things. But with Jimmy, he always wanted to give you that, aw shucks, I'm just this kid from Tomball,
right.
Texas. And Jimmy knows exactly what he's saying.
100%.
But at times, his body language would betray him. He would say the right thing, but he'd have kind of a shit-eating grin on his face like, I don't really mean this anyway. So, yeah, Jimmy's really high on the BS meter.
Very few players do not care about their numbers. In fact, and I know this for fact, when we used to go into the locker room, or even before we go into the locker room, because I used to sit at center, I do sit at center court for all the games, and players are constantly coming up going, how close am I to that triple-double?
Oh, sure, yeah. People care about those numbers.
Oh, my God, yes. Am I close to that record? Am I close to setting, an established whatever? And so when they say that they don't care about numbers, I don't buy that for half a second.
And I give all the credit in the world to Jimmy. You know, I was watching the game really intently, and early on, Jimmy got off to a good start, made his first four shots actually from the field. And I tweeted out that he's going to need to turn in a Tibbs game, meaning playing just about every minute, 45 minutes is going to have to get you, at least what I said initially was 25, 10, and 8. And then I upped it at halftime to 35 because I saw the way the young guys, Hero and Robinson, were playing. I'm like, Jimmy's going to have to carry this team all the way to the finish line, and that's exactly what he did.
All right, one other aspect of last night's game, I think LeBron actually mouthed a little bit in a positive way where he went to Jimmy, I think, early in the game and said, we're in trouble. He didn't say, you're in trouble.
No, he said the Heat are in trouble.
The Heat are in trouble. Okay. Oh, the Heat are in trouble.
Because what happened was the Heat ran out to a 13-point lead in the first quarter like they did in Game 1.
Okay, and
by
lost.
the end of the first quarter, the Lakers had reeled them in all the way down to 2. They had a big run at the end of the quarter, and LeBron, as he's going off the court, said to Jimmy, the Heat are in trouble.
Okay, so that makes it even more interesting,
so
to be
Jimmy
honest
gave
with
it
you.
back to him in the fourth quarter.
Yeah, at the end of the game, Jimmy goes back to him, you're in trouble, baby.
And most players would be afraid to offend LeBron. Jimmy doesn't care about any of that. That's the one thing I'll say. I mentioned earlier that there's a lot of BS there, but he is one of the most ultimate competitors in this league, and he's not going to back down to anybody. He may come up short, most likely will in this series, but he is not afraid of anybody, including LeBron James.
All right, what's really interesting leading into this cut, because I agree with you, he does not back down, and here he talks about his back and forth with LeBron from last night's game.
I mean, it's competition at its finest. I think LeBron has got the best of me way too many times. I respect the guy for it, but this is a different time now. A different group of guys that I have around me, and we're here to win. We're here to compete, but we're not going to lay down. We're going to fight back in this thing, even up 2-2.
Again, 100% agree with you. He will not back down from anybody, and that is a certain part of his personality that as a competitor of my own nature, or certainly somebody who covers sports, I really admire that.
Yeah, and that's one of the things that's rubbed people the wrong way throughout the course of his stops around the league. In Chicago, the young guys couldn't take some of his really pointed criticism that they didn't work hard enough, that they didn't care enough about losing games, and that became a point of friction with the Bulls during his last season in Chicago. Then he goes on to Minnesota. Didn't like the way Towns and Wiggins approached the game. Didn't feel like they worked hard enough in their games. Gets traded to Philadelphia, and then he had a problem with the head coach. Didn't feel like he was putting him in the best positions to win. So Jimmy is never going to hold his tongue when it comes to how he feels about a situation, whether it's a teammate, coach, or the front office. If you're not doing things up to his standards, he's going to let you know about it.
All right, I still had the Lakers winning this series in 5 games. So, again, that's the game I have Miami winning last night. And they did it undermanned with Jimmy really taking over. Kudos to him. But I think, LeBron is just going to come back pissed as all heck. And I think he's going to dominate the next game. Anthony Davis has got to be more involved. He's still the best player and the hardest matchup, for either team. So I anticipate the Lakers win the next 2 games.
What's really sad from a fan standpoint is the fact that they lose 2 of their 5 starters in Game 1. And Jimmy rolled his ankle really bad in Game 1. I was wondering how effective he would be, but he's one of these guys that is really able to play through injuries more than some NBA players. But you lose Goran Dragic, who played really well in the earlier rounds of the postseason. Now, he's not a superstar. He was an all-star once in his career, but he's a guy who can score. He can take some of the offensive pressure off of Jimmy. And then Bam Adebayo was really a revelation. He was an all-star this year, has gotten better and better as the playoffs have gone on, and especially in terms of what he's been able to do on the offensive end. You take those 2 guys out of the lineup, and you think there's no chance that Miami can even get a game off these guys. Well, now they won a game, possibly get Bam Adebayo back for Game 4. I think they have a chance maybe to get one more game. Ultimately, I agree with you. The Lakers will win the series because they've got 2 of the best 5 players in the world, and that's going to, be a little bit too much for Jimmy to handle on his own.
All right, so LeBron, both our estimations, is going to win his 4th NBA championship, and he will have been in 10 NBA Finals, which is
remarkable,
pretty amazing. He will be 4-6 overall. So I was looking last night at the guys who are undefeated in NBA titles. Of course, we think of Michael. He's 6 for 6. But Michael's actually surpassed by a couple of Boston Celtics. All 3 of these guys. John Havlicek, Casey Jones, and Tom Satch Sanders are 8 for 8 in NBA Finals.
Yeah, but there were 8 teams back then.
That's true. There's a whole different story. You only had to win a couple of rounds and you won championships. So, yeah, there's a big difference. Robert Horry, on the other hand, 7 for 7. He won titles for both Houston and the Lakers, correct?
Yes.
Okay.
Yeah, but Robert Horry was not even a starter on all those teams.
No, but he actually came up big in a lot of those NBA finals. He made some big baskets, if I remember correctly. Scotty, along with Michael, is 6 for 6, and then two other former Bulls who were 3 for 3 in Bulls uniforms, who won a couple of other championships elsewhere. Both Ron Harper and Steve Kerr, they're 5 for 5 in NBA finals. So again, I'm not taking anything away from LeBron. But he did lose 6 times in the NBA Finals. So, you know what?
Well,
sorry, you'll never be Michael.
Yeah,
Never.
No. But getting to 10 is quite an accomplishment,
Amazing.
especially in this era where there's so many good teams, so many star players. For him to constantly be able to carry his team to the finals says a lot about his ability, not only as a player, but as a leader and as an executive, the way he always constructs the best rosters.
Well, that's where I was going with this, because he went down to
He always
Miami.
stacks the deck in his favor.
100%. And listen, he stacked the deck in Los Angeles by getting the other best player in the world other than maybe Giannis and Kevin Durant.
And people will say, well, what did he have to do with it? Well, his agent basically orchestrated the whole thing that he would only allow Anthony Davis to be traded to the Lakers. I mean, it was people say, well, why didn't the Bulls or some other team try to trade for Anthony Davis? There was no other team that was even going to be considered. The only place Anthony Davis was going to be traded was to the Los Angeles Lakers so he could team up with Rich Paul's longtime friend, LeBron James.
All right, now we talked about this, and we're going to get to the Bulls in our last segment here after we talk to Vince Goodwill. The Bulls are going to have a lot of money. Anthony Davis is probably going to sign a very short-term deal, I'm guessing, with the Lakers after this season to stay with LeBron for the next year or two and maybe win some more titles out there. Could you ever see Anthony Davis ending up back here in Chicago, maybe somewhere down the road? The Bulls will have a lot of money in 2 years.
I think a lot depends on how LeBron's health holds up and what kind of contract that Davis signs. Now, we are all assuming that he may sign like a 1-year contract with a player option for the second year to give him a little bit of security in case of injury. But he has been hurt a lot in his career. Obviously, he orchestrated this move to get to Los Angeles to pair up with LeBron, and the Lakers will always be a team that will spend top dollar even after LeBron is gone to make sure that they're a competitive team with Anthony Davis as their lead star. I don't necessarily think that he would leave Los Angeles, but you never know. If LeBron, who's never really had a serious injury in his career, he did have the groin injury which caused him to miss some games a year ago. If he would get seriously hurt, then maybe he would consider it. But I kind of looking at that Anthony Davis is not a guy that any NBA team is going to be able to get.
Did you see the house that LeBron just bought out in Los Angeles?
I heard about it, but I hadn't seen it.
Holy shit.
Well, he can afford it.
Oh, my God. I mean, it's, I don't know, $40 million or something like that for the damn house. It's like 3 blocks long. It's got tennis courts. It's got swimming pools. It's got like a short golf course,
Sure,
in
why
its
not?
back. Oh my God. One of these lifetimes. Probably not. Anyway, I'll dream about it. It won't happen.
Yeah.
Anyway, let's take a break right here, and when we come back,
Vinny's got a place like that.
Yes, he does. In his palatial estate in
suburban
Detroit.
Yeah.
Anyway, maybe we'll tease him a little bit about his Pistons. Anyway, we'll be back right after this with Mr. Vince Goodwill. We'll be right back.
I think Baez is the guy you give the extension to. He'll get his bat straightened out. He's got to be more disciplined. I think he's pressing because he feels, I think maybe you drop the guy maybe in the order sometimes, but he's such a great fielder. The shortstop's supposed to be your best athlete. How do you view him, and how important is this postseason for him?
I don't think the postseason is that important for him. I think he's going to get a contract. They were working on it, Mike, before the shutdown, and I don't think it's changed much. Look, the Cubs know he can swing and miss, right? They know that he'll swing at those outs. It's not like anything's changed, but I think they're still willing to sign him up for exactly what you said. That arm will save as many runs as maybe he doesn't drive in because he swings and misses. I mean, that arm is the best arm I've seen at shortstop since Sean Dunston, Mike. Since Sean Dunston.
The Mike North Advantage every week right here on the Barroom Network.
And welcome back to the podcast. I am David Schuster. He, of course, is Mark Schanowski. And Mark, we're now joined by a very, very special guest and a good friend to both of ours and a very, very good basketball writer who knows his hoops. And we're talking about Mr. Vince Goodwill, who you can follow on Twitter, as I do, at Vince Goodwill. And I'll let you do more of an introduction.
Yeah, it was so much fun working with Vinny, though, over a number of years that he was at NBC Sports Chicago. And sometimes I had to play referee between him and Kendall Gill because they get in these scraps during the pregame show. And I think, Vinny, maybe you could share this. Was some of that just for the audience's benefit, or did you find yourself disagreeing with Kendall a lot?
About 75-25.
That's what I figured.
You realize that you have to be entertaining
right.
and everything else. And I think in the beginning, it really wasn't like this contrived thing. It was just being genuine. And then you realize, hey, we might have something here that people like.
Yep.
So you kind of play up to it a little bit more. And you knew it once the cameras were off. Like, we were all just, having fun and everything else.
Right.
Like, people were like, do you really just like Kendall Gill? I'm like, I love Kendall Gill. What are you people talking about? This is TV. But, it was, to me, it was entertaining. It was fun. And I apologize for having you play traffic cop for all of those years. I know that you agree with me most of the time.
No, we had a lot of fun. And remember that time we went to DePaul and did that segment, playing some basketball with Kendall?
Yes.
And Kendall, man, he is so competitive. Here you are just trying to mind your own business, and he's trying to turn this into this battle. And I know you guys play one-on-one afterwards, and you scored a couple times on him, and he was mad.
Yes. Here's the thing that people don't realize. Like, I had driven from Detroit, so my body wasn't even warm. I literally got out of the car after 5 hours and went out there, and that's why I was like, okay, you know what, Kendall Gill's getting really competitive here. Let me play one-on-one, and let me score a couple times so I can say I scored a couple times on a real-life NBA veteran. So at least I have that on my belt that I can always take with me until the next time I beat Kendall Gill in basketball.
And I saw you posted a little video of that last week, too, on Twitter.
Absolutely. Look, how many reporters do you guys know that can actually say I scored a couple of times on a bona fide NBA player? I should post that up every Sunday just to annoy Kendall.
Hey, Vinny, the highlight of my basketball career is I beat Kevin Garnett in Pop-A-Shot, and he was mad about that, too.
I bet he was sweating and cussing, too.
Hey, Vince, the basketball in the bubble overall, and they're almost nearing the finish line here. And, I would call it a success. I mean, maybe the ratings are not what they want it to be, but you know what? They're going to get to the finish line, and a lot of people didn't think that they would. So I think overall, the play has been pretty good, and it's been successful, and, they've avoided the pandemic in that bubble. Your thoughts on that in general? And, of course, we got to ask you about Jimmy Butler's game. We're recording this on Monday afternoon. His game last night, I know you've always been a big proponent of Jimmy, both on and off the court, and it's always fun to talk to Jimmy Butler for a litany of reasons. So your thoughts on the bubble and also what Jimmy did in the game last night?
Well, I'll start with the bubble experience first, because once they came out with the plan, guys, of, hey, we're going to have this bubble, this campus is going to be restrictive, that was around like May. And we were in the throes of the pandemic. We were in this very heated climate of, does it really exist? And do we have a handle on it? And everybody was staying indoors for extended periods of time. And we were talking about going and playing basketball. So just the fact that they were ambitious enough to have this elaborate plan, and the fact that nobody has really come down with anything. You remember you had the early things of, I think it might have been Rashawn Holmes from the Sacramento Kings ordering takeout or something like that.
Yeah, who could blame him, really? You get tired of the same food.
Yeah, that type of thing, right? So short of those slight hiccups, the fact that nobody has gotten sick, the fact that everybody, it looks as if we're entering Game 4 of the finals, tomorrow, that we're going to get through this. There's been no outbreaks. You look at football, you look at baseball, hockey has been really successful too. But the fact that I didn't believe, guys, I don't know about you, but I didn't feel like that this thing was actually going to finish. I thought they had a good chance of starting, but I really wasn't sure if it was going to finish. I wasn't sure people were going to be disciplined enough to abide by the restrictive rules when you consider these guys are used to having the world as their oysters, and nobody wants to sit in their rooms for 3 or 4 months at a time and everything else. Just the fact that it's gotten to this point, you got to give the NBA a lot of credit. You got to give the Players Association, everything else. That's just the basketball and the life aspect of it, in addition to all the other things that's been on the players' plate. But
Adam Silver should run for president. Adam Silver did a remarkable job.
I would vote for him.
Yeah, absolutely. And I know you're about to transition to Jimmy. We're going to say, Vinny is a big Jimmy supporter, and I know that you had to be smiling watching that game last night.
No, it's funny because Jimmy was a joy to cover, and me and Jimmy did not agree on everything. I think people always looked at it as, I was always Team Jimmy, or whatever, but me and Jimmy had a lot of disagreements. And one of the things that I come to appreciate about him was the fact that he always played a game at a very controlled pace, right? Mark, I'm sure, and actually, I'm sure you both guys can remember this in a different way. I spoke to someone in the NBA last night, someone who's watched the NBA for a long time, and he says the way that Jimmy is carrying this team, and this will bring back a lot of memories for you, is akin to Magic Johnson carrying the 91 Lakers through the NBA Finals. Mm-hmm. When Worthy and Scott were injured, no Kareem Abdul-Jabbar who had retired, and you're just carrying an undermanned team against basically a juggernaut. And the fact that the Lakers were really competitive in 91 against the Bulls, I think they got blown out one game, but the rest of the games, were really competitive because Magic had controlled the pace in a certain way. That's what I felt like when I was watching Jimmy Butler last night. And I'm not saying he's Magic Johnson or anything like that for the people listening, but just the fact that knowing I have to play both ends of the floor, I have to defend the best player on earth, and I have to make sure I get all these other guys good shots who cannot create shots for themselves. And then in the last 5 minutes, I have to go to the basket relentlessly, taking a beating, giving a beating to keep this Laker team at bay, because the Lakers had a 2-point lead, midway through the fourth quarter, and they were kind of stalking late until they kind of, relented a little bit. I thought it was by far the best, most impactful game Jimmy Butler has played in his career, and for the fact that it was Game 3 of the NBA Finals, I think that's something he will forever hold up. Even if in the moment he says it doesn't mean anything, it will mean something in the long run.
You know what, Vince? I actually was thinking of Magic Johnson as the game was unfolding and certainly afterwards, but I was thinking more of his rookie year when Kareem went down. I think it was Game 6 of the Finals against Philly, and undermanned. Magic led them to that victory that day and the title. That's what Jimmy reminded me of last night, because he did absolutely everything needed to win the game. But unfortunately, I think because it's Game 3 as opposed to Game 6, I think they awoke, to be honest with you, LeBron. And LeBron still is, to me, maybe the best player on the planet. And I think, he walked off that court last night, LeBron did, sort of sulking, and I think he was pissed off for a lot of reasons, and I think he's going to just really explode in Game 4. That's just a guess.
I think, and I don't disagree with you, Shu, I appreciate the fact that some people, they say don't tug on Superman's cape or anything like that, and we know of guys who challenged Michael Jordan through the years and everything else and wound up paying for it. But my thing is, if you're a star, and if you feel like you're a superstar in that, upper echelon, and you've helped carry your team to the NBA Finals, you feel like you have just as much of a right to be there as LeBron James does. That NBA title trophy doesn't have his name on it, at least not yet. And for you, you can't act like you're afraid of him. You can't act like that you just didn't have a 40-point triple-double, and maybe you're going to get Bam Adebayo back for Game 4, so you're going to have another shot creator, another guy who can defend and space the floor, another guy who's an excellent basketball player. So, yeah, while I agree with you, Shu, that LeBron James is probably going to try to come back with a vengeance, my biggest thing is, why did they freeze out Anthony Davis? Because he's the guy who's had the matchup throughout this entire series, from the height standpoint, from a skill standpoint. I felt like LeBron tried to put too much of his stamp on Game 3, and even though Anthony Davis was in foul trouble, he kind of did that to himself. But I was really, really curious about why they didn't feature him the way that they should have, because he'd been so dominant throughout this playoff run and so dominant throughout the first 2 games of the series.
Hey, Vinny, as you can imagine, Jimmy's play throughout these playoffs has created a little bit of a firestorm here in Chicago. Bulls fans thinking, hey, we had that guy on our team. How come we traded him away and decided to rebuild? And, it's pretty well documented that the front office had decided they didn't want to pay Jimmy Butler a supermax contract, and it was really a financial decision. But take us through the end of the Jimmy era, because I know you guys were really close. Jimmy kind of lost patience with some of the young guys on the team, didn't feel like they worked hard enough. There were reports of Jimmy dressing in a separate locker room and kind of detaching himself from the rest of the group. What is fact and what is fiction in how Jimmy's relationship with the entire Bulls organization fell apart?
I think, and Mark, you were there, and Shu, you were there for a lot of that as well. I think the Jimmy dressing in a different dressing room, I think that was in Tibbs' last year. My first half season there in 14-15, when Joakim Noah was, he was going through the load management, the minute restrictions, everything else, and that was Derrick Rose's first season back after missing, I think, all but 10 games of the previous 2 seasons. So there was a lot of adjustments being made. That was Jimmy's first All-Star season. It was almost like a team in transition while trying to compete and take one last stab at the Eastern Conference title. That was LeBron James' first season back in Cleveland. So there was a lot of context there, right? There was this, Tom Thibodeau going through with the front office, and you got this ascending Jimmy Butler. You got Derrick Rose trying to find himself. You got Pau Gasol who's there. You got Joakim Noah, who was really hurt, and we were really starting to see Joakim sort of break down. So you got all these different guys going in all these different individual directions. And they did have a 2-1 lead against the Cleveland Cavaliers, and had David Blatt been charged for calling a timeout that he didn't have, maybe the Bulls actually go to the finals that year, because they would have went up 3-1 and maybe they wind up holding on. That was such a topsy-turvy year. And for me, coming in my first year, my first half season, I came in around the All-Star break. My head was spinning, to be perfectly honest, watching all of this quiet sort of turmoil happening right in front of your eyes, but nobody wanted to admit that it was going on. So you fast forward to the next season. It's Fred Hoiberg's first year, and it's largely the same team, but there's this quiet acknowledgement that Jimmy Butler's the best player on this team. Jimmy Butler's the all-star. Jimmy Butler is the guy that this team should sort of start, building itself around. But there wasn't this full buy-in from everybody. And I think that bothered Jimmy to some degree, because he had always been the little brother to Taj Gibson and Luol Deng and Joakim Noah. And now his game had took him to a place where he was big brother. He was the all-star. He was, the guy on the marquee. He was the guy that you could depend on a night-to-night basis. And I think that those interpersonal dynamics are not special to the Bulls, but it was on full display for everyone to see. And Jimmy would be the first one to tell you that he learned a lot from being the guy that worked hard because he had to all of a sudden being the guy who's the headliner, and how to deal with people and how to bring people along. And I think that's honestly helped him. If you look at the way that he leads in Miami, I don't think that would have happened had he not had the Chicago experience, because people think of Jimmy wanting to be in charge as Jimmy wanted to score all the time and Jimmy wanted to just dominate. But I think Jimmy wanted people to believe in him and to follow him. And if you follow him, he'll do everything in his power to empower you on the floor to get the best out of you. We just never really got a chance to see the back end of that, because we didn't see the front end of it. Once Dwayne Wade came in, Rajon Rondo came in, you still had Nikola Mirotic and some of the other guys who he did not feel like were as invested in winning. So there was just so much conflict, so much drama, that it wasn't Jimmy's fault. And I'll see if you guys agree with me on this. I don't mean to be long-winded. I always felt like Jimmy is the ultimate mirror. Whatever issues you have going on in your organization, Jimmy Butler's going to hold up a mirror to it and hold you accountable in his own twisted way. But
yeah, well, he had the problems in Minnesota and Philadelphia, too. I mean, people look at it like, the Bulls should have kept him. Look what he's doing now. Well, he burned through 2 other organizations, too. So Jimmy has to take some responsibility there.
Yeah, but the thing I will also say is Minnesota and Philadelphia, as we've seen pre and post Jimmy, have not turned out to be model organizations. Like, Jimmy being the mirror is basically whatever issues you got going on in your house, Jimmy is going to expose them, because he sees it as his duty to perform with his truth. Now, in Miami, there aren't those issues that he has to expose. There's a culture that's already built in where there's so much internal accountability. All Jimmy Butler has to do is come in and be Jimmy Butler, and nobody has a problem with that. The issue is there's only one Miami Heat franchise. You know what I mean? In the NBA, there's only one of those, so he fits perfectly there. I am of the mind that he could have fit perfectly in Chicago if you ride with him, if you understand that, hey, we got to grow with him. We got to surround him. We got to nurture him. We got to deal with some of the stuff that he says and everything else. But because he performs and he plays hard, to me, and he wanted to be there, those are the 2 most important things when you talk about building around a franchise player. If you're assigning him as a franchise player, is he good enough? Does he want to be here? Does he play hard? And if all 3 of those answers are yes, I think you move full speed ahead with those type of guys.
Hey, Vince, again, kudos to the NBA. They're going to get to the finish line, and they will crown a champion, and I think it will be the Lakers. But let's look ahead now, because the next season, the starting date could be, God knows, it could be January 1, it could be Martin Luther King Day, it might not be until March when the NCAAs are going. Obviously, they want to have fans in the stands. That's where a lot of the revenue has been lost here. And if they start late enough, then the Olympics, with participation not only by the U.S., but all the other countries, that's going to be out the door. What's the best case scenario for the NBA going forward next season?
Here's the other part you didn't mention, Schuster. what if the owners try to play hardball with the players, and this turns into a protracted labor dispute? Like everything that we've heard leading up to this point has been the owners and the players being on the same side. When you talk about some of the racial justice initiatives and everything else, they've been very, very supportive of the players and what the players have wanted to do, provided that they get on the floor, right? Because the owners have to recoup some of this money. We all know 40% of the league's revenue comes from butts and seats. And if there's no butts and seats, then everybody's money is affected by that. So I wonder if the owners are going to want to get some level of rollback from the players who received their full salaries up until, I think, April 15th or whatever, April 1st, I believe it was. They were receiving full paychecks. So I wonder if the owners are going to want the players to, give back a little bit. And if they do, when the players don't want to give back, then you're going to have an issue. But to your original point or your original question, the best case scenario is Martin Luther King Day. To me, the most realistic scenario is maybe Valentine's Day. Maybe around February 14th or 15th. I don't think the NBA should concern itself with the Olympics, to be perfectly honest with you. That's not an NBA-sanctioned event. I know they're very involved with USA Basketball and everything else, but I think you have to sacrifice something to get your league back on its regular calendar. I don't think that they're going to try to – remember a couple months back or several months back, the league was talking about starting on Christmas. I don't think they want to do that. I think they want to get back on their October to April schedule, May and June for the playoffs. And I think for them to do that, they'll have to maybe get in a 70-game season, some type of 65-game season if they start in February. And hopefully you'll be done with your regular season around June. You get your playoffs in July and August, and then maybe you start the next season in November, and that gets you closer to normalcy. But I don't think they can afford to get back on the Olympics. I think you got to get guys adequate rest. You got to get free agency. You got to get the draft. There's so many different things that you have to get done before you can really align yourself and say, okay, we're ready to start on Christmas or MLK Day. I think the middle of February might be a little more realistic to give yourself time for a labor dispute.
Hey, Vinny, what do you make of the changes the Bulls have made during this offseason, bringing in Arturas Karnisovas as the head of basketball operations, Mark Eversley as the GM, and then they surprised a lot of people by going out and getting an established coach and paying top dollar to bring Billy Donovan in. It looks like the Reinsdorfs have decided that those empty seats in the United Center and the fan apathy has really reached the ownership level. Are you surprised, A, and does Arturas have a reputation around the league as a guy that can get things done?
Well, I feel like lightning is about to strike me, so I'm about to go hide in a closet somewhere because I think the Bulls have done an excellent job from the start to finish. An excellent job.
How about that?
We're recording
mark
this.
the tape, okay?
Yeah.
we got a quote for Twitter now.
Right. I'm still alive. Lightning has not struck me down yet or anything like that. But I think that we've seen Michael Reinsdorf's footprint, his stamp on this organization in a way that we've wanted him to have, right? I think we all have had certain levels of expectation for him to be more assertive and to sort of step outside of his father's shadow, which is not an easy thing to do by any stretch of the imagination. I don't take that lightly at all, especially when your father's the one who made the fortune, right? So you're walking into a very privileged situation. But I do believe that last season, the way that last season was trending with Jim Boylan, with Garden Pax, I think it was very important for him to say, okay, we're not going to fully hit the reset button. We're not trading everybody. This is not like a bad collection of players. We just need to start over with new voices in the building, and we need to get a fresh head coach, and we need to get someone who's a teacher and a coach, and someone who can connect with players. And before you get the coach that connects with players, you got to get a front office vision that's fresh and a fresh set of eyes. And I believe that going through the long process that they went through, I think when you don't hire necessarily the quote-unquote hot name, when you go through it and you interview a bunch of people, I know that he talked to a bunch of people from a bunch of different teams, not necessarily like interviewing, but just getting input and understanding how teams are built and understanding the structures that teams need. I think that was very critical for him, and it's not always a given. When you've had one management group in for the better part of 2 decades, and even though you've shuffled coaches in and out, you've had one level of vision, and it's been John Paxson's vision largely, and this is a guy who won championships for you, played a huge part in winning championships. So, for Michael Reinsdorf to go that far, and then also to say, you know what, Billy Donovan's on the market. Let's go get him. Let's pay top dollar. Like, to me, I'm trying to figure out if this is bizarro. I have no idea who these Chicago Bulls are.
Turning the NBA upside down. Yeah, it's been fun to watch. I know people are excited about what's going to happen next in terms of the roster composition, but we can talk about that another day. I got to ask you one more thing before we let you go. We started this segment with talking about some of the arguments that you and Kendall had on the air over the years. I remember one time you guys, I think this was real. Now, I might be mischaracterizing this, so correct me if I'm wrong. Did you say on the air that Jimmy Butler is better than Scottie Pippen?
I did say that. I said that I would take Jimmy Butler over Scottie Pippen. I said he was better. I said I would take him
Why is that?
over Scottie Pippen.
Why is that? Refresh my memory here.
Okay, but here's the thing. And it's almost a similar argument for taking Jimmy Butler over Paul George. I think Paul George is a more talented player than Jimmy Butler from a physical gift standpoint and everything else and what you can do on the floor. I think he's better. But as this has shown, if I need a number one guy, a guy who's not afraid to lead a team, if I need a number two, I'm taking Scottie Pippen. If I need a number one, I'm taking Jimmy Butler because Jimmy Butler can lead my franchise in a way that I don't believe Scottie Pippen was ever built to.
It sounds like you're saying that Jimmy Butler's better than Scottie Pippen.
No. I'm not saying that, but I'm.
Can I treat him as a hostile witness, David?
Yes. Subpoena him.
Here's the thing. Okay. I will
Your Detroit showing through that 1.8 seconds is like at the forefront, right?
I put it like this.
The migraine game.
If I said someone caught a migraine and is not playing, would you say that's Scottie Pippen or Jimmy Butler? If I said somebody's upset that he didn't take the last shot and they decided they were going to throw on the bench, would you say that's Jimmy Butler or Scottie Pippen? Come on, guys. Work with me here.
Mark just wanted to do that to rile you up a little bit.
Yeah, we
had
to get his blood boiling a little bit. Vinny's been measured. He's been giving really great answers, and we're like, we got to get to the heart of the matter here,
He was really going to go after the bad boys, the Pistons back in the day, but he decided, no, I won't go that far.
Hey, you know what else is funny?
You, Mark. I appreciate that.
You know what else is funny? Yesterday was Derrick Rose's birthday. I don't think Jimmy knew that, but there's some irony there, isn't there? Jimmy putting
I thought that was hilarious. I was going to point that out on Twitter, but I did not want the Derrick Rose people or the Detroit Pistons fans who love Derrick Rose now to come in my mentions and just bomb me.
Yeah, you caught enough of that, didn't you, over the years?
In my old age.
Hey, Vinny, I got to ask you this because there have been a lot of interviews obviously done down in the bubble in Orlando, and I saw this one and it really shook me up. Well, shook me up, but I had to scratch my head where I guess somebody was interviewing Rajon Rondo, and he said that Jimmy was one of his favorite teammates. Was he?
Absolutely.
So, in spite of that one time where he stood up for some of the younger players, he actually got along with Jimmy?
Absolutely. Well, here's the thing. Rajon Rondo's Instagram post, whatever that was more directed towards Dwayne Wade.
Right.
And we knew that they had, their own issues dating back to the Boston, Miami days. Jimmy put it like this. Jimmy made a B+ comment, in the locker room that night. Dwayne Wade took it to the next level, and that's what completely prompted it. Had Jimmy Butler said what he said about the young players not caring enough or whatever it was, I can't remember how it was framed. As it stood alone, it wouldn't have been so bad. But Dwayne Wade, the veteran, the champion, he coming in right back in behind him. I felt like they were synchronized swimmers.
Oh, hell yeah. Yeah.
Coming out of the locker room that night with their agenda. So, no, I can see Jimmy Butler and Rajon Rondo. I know that they liked each other. They really loved each other. Can you imagine two more hard-headed guys not getting along? That was a match made in heaven.
Well, you saw when Rondo took the hard foul on Jimmy, Jimmy was laid out there for about a minute. He got his senses back together, and they kind of joked about it at the free throw line afterwards. Well, maybe half joking, but I'm sure they respect the fact that, hey, you're going to come in here, you're going to take a hard foul, and had the roles been reversed, it'd have been the same way.
Exactly. I think Jimmy and Rajon both respect guys who play hard. And if you remember, had Rajon Rondo not broken his thumb in that first round, who knows what the trajectory of things would have looked like, because the Bulls would have beaten the Celtics. Maybe they would have gotten waxed by the Wizards in the next round because the Wizards had the better matchup. But maybe that team goes to the Eastern Conference Finals. And then do you break it up, or do you run it back? Or you make –
then you run it back.
Roster or whatever. Maybe so. Who knows what happens if Rajon Rondo doesn't break his thumb. But that run towards the end of that season and those first two playoff games was some exhilarating basketball, and Jimmy Butler and Rajon Rondo were at the forefront of it.
Hey, Vinny, Bill Laimbeer played hard. I think a little bit too hard. What do you think?
Oh, goodness.
We don't have another half hour. We'll leave it alone.
I mean, I feel like some people in Detroit don't even like Bill Laimbeer.
There you go.
Look, we might always be on the same page on that one. We just loved him because he was ours.
Right. Hey, Vinny, we appreciate you joining us. It's been great to catch up with you, and I can't wait to see you again in person.
Yeah, keep up the great work at Yahoo Sports.
Appreciate it, guys.
Yeah, we look forward to seeing you next time you're in Chicago, okay?
Absolutely. Appreciate it, guys.
All right, take care. And we'll be back right after this.
On the debut episode of Pass the Mic, veteran sports writer and broadcaster Peggy Kaczynski talked about having things mansplained to her after she's made an error.
When you make a mistake, it's devastating, and we all feel it. You don't need anyone telling you or pointing out that you were wrong about this. Yes, I get it. The best thing to do is to admit it immediately, post it, say it, and move on from it. Make a joke of it and move on. But when they repeatedly want to try to point out that, well, that's why you don't really know football. I'm like, dude, just because you played high school football in Chicago doesn't mean you know any more than I do, okay? Stop. You stopped at high school, okay? That is not the greatest end all. We could all catch up to anything you learned from then on. And it really ekes me when guys try to do that, and they do it because it makes them feel better. So once you realize that, you have to brush them off. You have to literally brush them off like a little piece of dandruff on your shoulder and just, hey, oh yeah, that was there. Sorry, and move on.
Pass the Mic with John Buffone and Alyssa Barbieri, 2 times a month on the Barroom Network.
Welcome back to the podcast, and as always, Mark, I said in advance that Vince Goodwill would be opinionated, and of course he delivers.
I knew Vinny would deliver, and it was funny. I remember that Jimmy Butler, Scottie Pippen thing like it was yesterday, and those guys, he and Kendall were really going at it, and we were just aghast, and his Detroit bias really did show through in that argument because you notice he brought up the migraine. I brought up the 1.8 seconds, but he just looks at Pippen as being mentally soft because of that Game 7 back in 1990, which is pre 6 championships and all the things that Scottie accomplished. But I think that his Detroit days kind of show through there a little bit.
Well, he also said that Scottie was not a number one. Well, the year plus that Michael took off and tried to play baseball, I mean, Scottie, if it wasn't for some horseshit calls by the referees at Madison Square Garden, would have led the Bulls to the NBA Finals. So I disagree with him on that, but I won't disagree with him on this. Bill Laimbeer is a thug player, was a thug
and
player,
he admitted
and he agreed
that.
with
and
that.
People around the league, you won't find anybody say anything good about Bill Laimbeer.
Good for him.
People just don't like the way he conducted himself on the court because there's a difference between playing hard, taking hard fouls, and trying to injure somebody. And Laimbeer didn't care if he was going to injure somebody, and that's the big strike against him that no one can explain away.
And he still believes that his play was the right way to play because I've seen so many interviews with Bill Laimbeer after the fact.
Yeah, and getting back to the whole Scottie Jimmy thing. Pippen was the MVP of the All-Star game that year, the first year that Michael left, and really carried that team. He raised his offensive game to a level that we hadn't seen before, and he could have scored a lot more points if he wasn't playing with the greatest player of all time in Michael Jordan. So Pippen was the perfect sidekick to Jordan, and I don't think necessarily you have to define him as a number 2. He just knew exactly how he could play a perfect role next to Jordan to help win championships, and that's what he did.
All right, let's go to the modern day Bulls right now, and I'm seeing more and more, of course, rumors. We're about 6 weeks away from the NBA draft, which I think will be November 18th. And, I'm sure you've seen the same stuff, Mark, that, more and more conversation of the Bulls maybe drafting a guard now and maybe going with a 3-guard offense. And the name that keeps popping up more and more is Killian Hayes. Tell us a little bit about him.
Well, he's a 19-year-old player from France who played in a German league this past year. And he's a guy that is very good in pick and roll, very good in controlling the ball, good in reading offenses and defenses, very smart, cerebral player. The one knock on him is that he's all left hand. He can't go to his weak hand, and that could be a problem in the NBA, that he's a dominant player that way. His outside shooting is a work in progress, not exactly proven as a three-point shooter, but you get the feeling that people look at him as an old-fashioned lead guard, a guy who can really run an offense, can make sure you get into your sets, very efficient in pick and roll, making good decisions on whether or not to drive to the basket or dump it off to his big man. The tape I've seen of him, I like him, but I don't necessarily think that he would qualify as a guy that you'd take fourth in a draft. This is not a very strong draft, and a lot of it depends on what Billy Donovan and Arturas feel like they need to do with their offense. A lot of people said, well, you need a small forward because Otto Porter will be gone after next season. Well, maybe they're going to go with a 3-guard front and not even worry about filling that position.
Yeah, I would say they'll worry about that when the time comes.
Right.
Maybe because a lot of money is going to come off their salary at that juncture. Maybe there's a free agent. It's the guy up in Milwaukee, although that's a pipe dream. But maybe they're just looking at one step at a time as far as that goes. If you go through enough of these mock drafts, and I do all the time, if you get 10 mock drafts, maybe 2 of them are the same at the top. The other 8, they're all jumbled. So I've seen LaMelo Ball falling to number 4. If he's at number 4, do you grab him?
Yeah, that'd be a tough decision because he has that great individual talent. He can score. He's got the shooting range that a lot of teams are looking at. But a lot of his moves are, it just kind of falls in line with the whole ball drama. Like he goes for flair over just solid play. And I don't think that's necessarily going to change on the NBA level. I think he's going to be a guy that's going to be on the highlight reels a lot, making a lot of the no-look passes between the legs, all these kind of things, taking 35-foot shots. Whether or not he's going to translate to being part of a winning program, I'm not so sure. If he's sitting there at 4, I guess you would consider him, but he would not be a guy that I'd be all that excited about adding because the Bulls have so many young players. They've got to develop the guys on the roster. To bring in a wild card like Ball, I'm not sure that's the best fit. I've said consistently I'm in favor of trading that pick. Mm-hmm. I just don't know whether or not there's going to be a big market because it's not a great draft.
All right, again, another mock draft has all those guys going in front, and James Wiseman, the 7'1" center who only played a short time at Memphis.
3 games.
I can't really tell you what kind of player he's going to be. He's got the physical attributes, of course. If you draft him, you potentially have your center for the next 10 years.
Well, that would mean you'd have to make some moves on the current roster.
100%.
You're not going to keep both.
Wendell Carter would likely be gone.
Yeah. And I don't know if you've seen these videos the Bulls have been posting. Lowry showing some hops with some of the dunks he's had at the Advocate Center. I'll be curious to see how Billy Donovan uses Lowry Markkanen because he was misused, especially in this last season where he was told to stand in the corner and wait for the ball to come to him instead of trying to catch the ball on the move, take advantage of the fact that he's an athletic 7-footer who can score at the rim. Back to Wiseman, though, in the games that he played against weak competition. Mm-hmm. It was the beginning of the year. Mm-hmm. Generally, the power teams schedule all these cupcakes early in the year, and he was a man among boys at 7'1". But the thing that you like about him, he can run the court, very athletic. He would really anchor your defense in terms of shot blocking and rim protection. We don't know really what kind of shooting range he has because he didn't have to show it because he was able to score right at the basket against the teams they played against early in the season. I would be intrigued by him, but it would require you'd have to trade somebody else. And we don't know exactly where this front office is in their evaluations of guys like Carter and Markkanen and Zach LaVine. I mean, are they going to commit to these guys? And Kobe White can throw in that group, or are they going to consider trades?
Well, first of all, if Wiseman falls to you at number 4, you don't necessarily have to trade somebody, but it puts you at a position of strength to trade somebody, meaning like a Wendell Carter can now bring you another asset, and if Wiseman can pan out the way some people think that he might, I don't know. That to me is like a plus situation.
Yeah, I think it's definitely the move. If he's on the board, I would take Wiseman at 4. No question about it.
All right. Now, another name that's likely going to be on the board at number 4, and it's more the small forward position. And I didn't write it down this time how to say his name, so I'm going to butcher it.
Danny Avdija.
Thank you. You said it for me. We talked about him previously. He can do a lot of things on the court. Sort of scares me his outside shooting. He's got one of those European kind of like push shots. But I like the way he gets to the basket. He seems to be a kind of total team player. If he's there at number 4 and the other options are not there, what do you do?
Yeah, I mean, he's a guy that's interesting because he can be a secondary shot creator at 6'9", a guy who can handle the ball, who's considered by all scouts to be a good passer, can defend at a couple of different positions. The one thing that worries you, as you mentioned, his shot has not been consistent. He's only 21 years old, but he hasn't shot the ball consistently, even from the free throw line. His percentages haven't been what you'd like. So that's something that he would have to improve. Obviously, Arturas has great connections overseas. I'm sure he's got the most in-depth scouting report you could possibly get on this young man. Whether or not he likes him enough to take him at 4, I'm not sure.
All right, before we go around the NBA, and I want to ask you about a couple of things around the league. Apparently, the Bulls had a lot of their players there for these workouts. Chris Dunn did not show up. And I think it was sort of an excused absence, even though it wasn't mandatory, obviously. But, he says he's still rehabilitating his injury. I don't know if that's the case, really. Or do you think it's more like he knows he's not going to be here?
Yeah, I think he's probably had conversations with the front office that they've given him an indication that either they're not going to pick up his option, which is at about $7 million for next year, or, basically just told him to try to find the best deal you can, and we'll consider matching it. I just feel like with all the injuries he's had, the last thing he wants to do is go into a voluntary minicamp and somehow get hurt again. That would not be in his best interest. Although Denzel Valentine, who's in a similar situation, who's going to be a restricted free agent, he's playing with these guys. And I don't think, even though we've all played pickup basketball, once you start playing, you're going to play hard.
Mm-hmm.
It's not like you're going to go, you say, well, they're only going 3/4 speed. Once you start playing a basketball game,
there's pride.
You're going to go hard, and guys could get hurt. So it is a bit of a risk for anybody who's going into the marketplace in this offseason.
All right, let me ask you about one other name. He's not a player. He used to be a player. He's one of my favorite players. He played at West Texas State. Do you remember who I'm talking about?
West Texas State, no.
That's Maurice Cheeks.
Oh, all right.
Okay,
yeah.
Maurice Cheeks played at West Texas State. He used to play against Southern Illinois way back in the day. Anyway, he's from DuSable High School. He's an assistant coach for Oklahoma City currently.
Right.
The Bulls are still potentially interviewing some other guys. Would that be a smart move? I think it would be. I mean, he's a Chicagoan. He's been with Billy Donovan.
Yeah.
I don't know what their relationship is. And you know what? The Bulls have some young players who need tutoring at that position specifically.
Well, we know he can jump in and sing the national anthem if you a last-minute cancellation. That was one of the most heartwarming moments where he helped the young lady sing in Portland.
Yeah,
when he was the head coach out there. So, yeah, I mean, it would be a popular move with the fan base. Obviously, as you mentioned, a Chicago native, was a great player for the Philadelphia 76ers, a long-time NBA head coach and assistant. I think if he and Billy have a good working relationship, it'd be great to bring him in. But we don't know what the status is going to be of Roy Rogers and Chris Fleming, who have 2 more years left on their deals. And maybe Billy came in with the understanding that, hey, we'd like you to keep these guys on staff.
All right, speaking of coaching, I'm sure you saw this one also. I mean, finally, Steve Nash was introduced, apparently, whether it was virtual or otherwise. And then Kyrie Irving came out with some comments saying...
Only Kyrie.
Yeah, I mean, you've talked about him numerous times. He said,
favorite.
well, we don't really look at him as a head coach. He's just a collaborator. I mean, come on. I mean, is he already setting the table for a disaster
And then he goes on to say, well, maybe one day I'll be the head coach, or KD will be the head coach. It's like, what are you doing? And he mentioned Jacques Vaughn, who is going to stay on as the lead assistant for Steve Nash. Yeah, I mean, Kyrie just can't get out of his own way. He's just one of these guys that he'd be better off just hanging a no comment placard around his
I don't think that's possible.
Chest and just move on.
He even took
nothing to see here.
He even took some shots. Not so veiled, but it was shots against LeBron when he was asked about his situation going forward, and I mean it was pretty obvious he was taking shots at LeBron.
He was going to do an Instagram last week. I didn't check that out, but supposedly he was going to, in his own words, explain where he stood on things. He is just a unique character, and until
talented.
Obviously he hit the shot that clinched the championship for the Cavaliers in 2016. It was not LeBron, so he's a phenomenal player. I mean, he's a guy, a wizard in terms of handling the ball, being able to create his own shot. Remarkable player. He's been hurt a lot the last few years, and it'll be interesting to see what he and Kevin Durant can do together, but both are very headstrong. I'm just not sure it's going to work out the way a lot of folks in Brooklyn are expecting it to.
All right, we talked about Maurice Cheeks, who's one of the all-time point guards coming out of Chicago. There's so many great point guards that have come out of Chicago. Another one that came out of Chicago who just became a new head coach elsewhere is Doc Rivers, and he's going to be in charge of the Philadelphia 76ers. He'll be working with Elton Brand hand in hand. That'll be interesting in itself. can Doc Rivers finally get the best out of this combination of Joel Embiid and Ben Simmons going forward?
It's going to require some sacrifice and some hard work by both of those players and a commitment to trying to do the things that they need to strengthen their games. And I'm not sure if Doc Rivers or anybody else can get it out of him. This is a players' league, and the players have to be motivated to make the sacrifices and the changes in the games they need to build a winning program. And I'm not sure at this point in their careers whether Joel Embiid or Ben Simmons are willing to change. And Doc Rivers has a great reputation around the league of being able to reach players, working with players, getting the best out of guys. And if he can't do it, I don't know. Maybe they're going to have to break that up. But I guess this would probably solidify the thought that they won't be trading these guys. They're going to let Doc see what he can do with that group. And he had Tobias Harris with the Clippers, who was another max guy on the Philadelphia 76ers. It'll be interesting to see if he can get through to Embiid and Simmons that we've got enough talent on this roster to win the East and maybe win an NBA championship if you guys will just listen to what I'm saying, because he went through the experience in Boston where he had the big three there. He knows what it takes for guys to share the ball in order to try to make some sacrifices for winning. I don't know. We'll see if Doc can get through to these guys.
And Mark, as you well know, timing is everything in life. And, when the Bulls saw that Billy Donovan was available, they jumped on him.
Sure.
Well, then Doc Rivers became available a very short time after. In retrospect, I mean, you can't go back, obviously, but if Doc Rivers and Billy Donovan were both available at the same time, Doc being from Chicago, Doc has won an NBA title. He won in 2008 with the Celtics. Do you think that's the move the Bulls would have gone? You can't go back, but I'm just posing that as a hypothetical.
Yeah, I had a lot of people reach out to me on Twitter saying, man, we could have had Doc Rivers if we just waited another couple of weeks. That's not the way life works, unfortunately. As we know in the broadcasting profession, you have to strike when the iron is hot. And for the Bulls, Billy Donovan was the best guy out there. They went out aggressively, made a deal with him. Arturas talked about how excited he was to bring him in. Doc Rivers would bump up another few million on the pay scale. He could be a $10 million a year kind of coach. I'm not sure the Bulls would have gone that high, and I don't know if Doc Rivers would have been interested in coming home. So it's one of those hypotheticals. It'll be something that we'll be watching over the next few years to see how much success Doc has in Philadelphia and what Billy Donovan does with the Bulls, and think, well, maybe that would have worked out, but the timing just wasn't right, and that happens in so many areas of life.
All right, Mark, and one last thing, and speaking of timing and hypotheticals, Adam Silver has a big decision to make next season when to start the league back up. I mean, we talked with Vinny about this, maybe early January, maybe Martin Luther King Day, maybe Valentine's Day. There's almost some kismet if it starts on Valentine's Day, or March even. And it's going to, likely the later it starts, it's going to cut into the Olympics. And listen, the league and so many other countries around the world have profited from their players playing in the Olympics. But as Vinny said, first things first, the league comes first. What do you anticipate? Is there any kind of compromise potentially? I mean, leagues have shut down for a couple of weeks, but I don't see that happening.
Well, players and their agents would love to be able to participate in the Olympics. I saw something last week that LeBron James was committed to playing in the 2021 games. But
like he needs the money.
Yeah. I mean, that's true. I mean, how many more sponsorships do you need? But it's just something that the players and the agents really like, the fact that they can get their brand on a worldwide forum, which the Olympics are. The players would like to have that window open where they can compete in the Olympics. But I agree with you. If the season's not going to start until February or even March, there's no way that they can get it done in time for these guys to go to Japan and play in the Olympics.
And for what it's worth, as of right now, the Olympics are going forward, but who knows what's going to happen even tomorrow in this world with what's going on currently. But the Olympics are scheduled for July 23rd through August 8th. Mm-hmm. And if it's the same like it has been this season, if everything starts later, there's no chance that, the players would be able to play.
Yeah, it's going to be very problematic. And Vinny talked about the fact that he doesn't think that the NBA is interested in having a permanent Christmas start time, because there have been some owners who said they'd like to see the season move back to avoid direct competition with the NFL. Interesting what Vinny said, that maybe they want to keep the schedule the way it is, like starting in late October and being done in June. That's something that's going to have to be worked with together with the Players Association. Vinny also said there could be some problems with if they decide to break the CBA and start over. So There could be some storm clouds on the horizon. We just hope that a vaccine is developed that's workable, that fans can come back to NBA arenas, enjoy this product, because as you and I both know, there's nothing like being in that arena and enjoying it in person.
100%. I look forward to the day when we can get back out there. And I'm a traditionalist. I admit it. I like when the season starts in October and ends in June. I mean, first of all, when the Bulls were winning championships, my life was centered around that. So I knew where I was at the end of June, and I knew it was a summer vacation starting July 1, and I'm hoping we can get back to that. Mark, it's been fun as always. We'll look forward to our next episode, which will be sometime next week.
Yeah, might have a champion by then. Most likely we'll have a champion by then. We can talk about the draft in earnest now, because it's going to be a long off season. The one nice thing is that by the time the NBA finals wrap up, we'll just have about 5 weeks until the draft, so then we can really focus in on that.
All right, we'll talk to you then.
All right, sounds good.